Reflecting on my early years of preparedness, I often find myself pondering, why did I make this choice or why did I make that choice? And even realizing the futility in some of the choices and actions that I've made. The truth is, in preparedness and with everything in life, knowledge is gained through experience, and mistakes are an unavoidable part of that process. So remember, it's okay to make these mistakes. These are stepping stones towards a more informed and effective prepping strategy. This education process is unavoidable, and the best we can do is watch videos like this and learn a little bit and make the best decisions with the information we have at the time. Today, I want to go over what I would do differently if I was just beginning to prepare. Now that I understand how things work a little better, and I think a little bit more logically rather than emotionally about what's possible. I'm going to go over how I would spend the first $1,000 on becoming better prepared. And while it may seem like a lot, in the grand scheme of things, $1,000 really isn't that much. It's a drop in the bucket. Also, this doesn't have to be done all at once. If you have the ability and the means to do so, great. If you just got a tax refund or if you've got money in savings, that's fantastic. But if not, create a checklist and get these done in a time frame that works for you. And as we go through this video, you'll see that the way I used to do things and the way most people start out is sort of organized chaos, meaning I had a lot of stuff and I felt like I had all my bases covered, but there were quite a few holes in my plans. I purchased quite a few things that I didn't really need, and I still have some of those today. So hopefully this video can help you avoid the chaotic mess that comes with storing canned food in every nook and cranny of your home. But with that, let's go ahead and get into the list that I have here today. The first thing I would do is take about $100 and go get some shelf-stable food. Food that is going to last anywhere from a year to 2 years, food that the family eats, and food that's going to be easy to prepare in an emergency situation. Now, in preparedness, you hear all the time about canned foods and the beans and the rice. And when I first started out, we went on a canned food binge. Like I said earlier, we had canned food in every nook and cranny of the home. The problem with that is the organized chaos of you find food 4, 5, 6 years later that's expired because you sort of hid it from yourself and you forgot it was in one place or another. So make sure the food that you get, you incorporate into your diet. If you don't know how to prepare dried beans, that is something you need to put on that list of things to learn and avoid buying that in the beginning. If you don't eat a lot of these canned foods, while they do last, they have a really long shelf life, it's sort of pointless to get them in the beginning. Just so make sure if you do, you start incorporating those into your diet. The odds are most of us probably have at the very least a few days worth of food. We could survive a few days without having to go to the grocery store. But this $100, you can actually get quite a bit for $100, whether you're talking about pastas, cereals, crackers, snacks, canned food, all the different things that will have a really good shelf life, and you don't have to worry about refrigeration or it going bad in a couple months or a couple weeks. So that's the first thing that I would do. For one, it makes you feel a little bit more confident about, hey, I'm doing something, I am becoming better prepared. And two, while we can go a little while without food, we don't want to have to, and it just make us feel better about the whole situation if we have something to eat on a daily basis. The next thing I would do is get a few water containers. These range in price. You've got the aquatainers, which you can get on Amazon, which I believe are like $20. Walmart has different brands of water containers, but it's really going to make things a whole lot easier if you have a few of these 5 or 6 gallon water containers. When we started out, we were using 2-liter water bottles and things like that. And while those will work, it does sort of get a little bit chaotic because, again, just like the canned food, you have a few bottles stuffed here, a few bottles stuffed there. And if you don't have the crates to store those 2-liter water bottles, it becomes sort of a challenge to stack those and do things like that. So having a few of these water containers is something that in the beginning I would definitely do. And then over the course of time, you can add one or two, figure out your storage space, and continue on that water storage. And water storage is one of both the hardest and the easiest to do. It's the hardest because of the amount you need to store, but it's the easiest because there's not a whole lot you have to do. You can put some of the Aquamira storage solution in there, which just helps the water out, but it's not completely necessary. You can store water straight out of the tap. But I do suggest having some sort of water, these larger water storage solutions. Like I said, it's something we didn't think about in the beginning, but it absolutely is one of the most important parts of preparedness. The next thing I would do, and this sort of goes along with food, but you have all that food and you're going to need a way to prepare that food. And this gets missed quite a bit in the preparedness community when people talk about storing beans and storing rice and storing spaghetti. You've got to be able to have a way to prepare those and the skills to prepare those, knowing different recipes. I would say at the very least, get a couple of the little alcohol stoves. I think they're like 10 or 15 bucks a piece, and some denatured alcohol. And you'll be able to cook just about anything with these, and it's really low cost. Now, the reason I say a couple is because once these last about 20 minutes, and once that burns out, you can't pour alcohol into that hot stove, so you'll need another one to switch that out. If you want to go a little bit more expensive here, they've got the butane stoves, which are fantastic. I have an Iwatani, and I also have a gas one. You get the little canisters of butane, and these burners are, for the most part, safe for indoor use. I would still get a CO2 detector just to be safe, but you can cook with these, and they last 4 to 6 hours, somewhere in that range of cooking, depending on if it's high heat or low heat. But these are fantastic for cooking indoors when you're not able to cook outdoors, because the power could go out because of a severe winter storm. It could be a hurricane. There are a lot of different reasons where you may not be able to go outside, which also I suggest most people these days have the propane grills outside. And if you do, make sure to grab an extra can of that propane. That way you have one backup. Now, these will last quite a while. I believe they're like 20 hours of cooking. Don't quote me on that, but they will last a while. But you just never know. So having a backup that you can rotate through is going to extend that. And if you want, maybe even get a couple of extra. But it's really important that we look at what our food plan is going to be, and we have the means to cook those meals and prepare those meals when the electricity's out, the gas is out, and we don't have our regular kitchen appliances handy. If you've got a wood burning stove, that's fantastic. You can cook inside on that. If you've got a fire pit outside, that's great. Just make sure that you have some of these emergency options as well as that. Like I said, the alcohol stoves are really inexpensive and really easy to use. The next thing that I would do a little bit differently is my emergency power plan. In the beginning, you get a bunch of different flashlights, you can get the batteries, and all of these are fantastic. I still have 50 or so flashlights lying around the house. But at some point, it becomes a little bit more redundant than you need it to be. And if I were to change things, I would have paid more attention to the external power banks, the small solar generators, the inverters, things like that. Now, in my defense, back when I first started out, you had the lead acid batteries, and the power banks were not as good as they are these days. But an inverter and an extension cord is a fantastic way of being able to keep your refrigerator running. You plug that inverter into your car battery, turn your car on, and run that refrigerator for a couple hours, and you're good to go. A battery bank or a solar generator, basically the same thing. You can get a small 600 watt solar generator that will run your refrigerator for a couple hours a day. And honestly, in most of the more likely disaster scenarios, that is going to be your main goal, is keeping that food that you have in the refrigerator cold, or the chest freezer. So having one of these smaller power banks, having a way to recharge that energy via solar or however you can do it, is something that I would have paid a little bit more attention to. Now, these range in price from a couple $100s to a couple $1,000. So it really depends on your needs. But at the very least, I would have the inverter, the extension cord, and one of these smaller power banks. Also, rechargeable batteries. If solar is an option for you, these rechargeable batteries are going to be priceless because you're not just throwing them away. You can actually use them over and over again. So have a mix of the rechargeables and the regular Energizers or Duracells, but make sure you have those too. And in this range, I would say around $300 you can get this done. You can get a pretty good inverter that will turn on a couple of lights and keep your refrigerator running for around $100. And like I said, some of these battery banks, you can get one that will get the job done for a couple of $100. But think about your emergency power beyond the flashlights and things like that. Now, the next one wasn't really an issue for me because my wife is a nurse, but this is so important that I wanted to add it to this list, and that's have a really good comprehensive first aid kit. And I'm not talking about the trauma kit and the tourniquets and things like that. Those are important as well. But I'm talking the everyday injuries, the over-the-counter medications. There are pre-made kits online that you can get that are decent. This one right here I got from Surviveware. Lisa and I just did a video on this, and it's a really good kit. About $130 though. But this can save you not only in emergencies and disaster situations, but everyday life as well. It's really important to have one of these. It's one of those you're not going to miss it unless you need it type items, and it really can help you out in a number of situations. Maybe even save you some money from having to go to the emergency room because you have some of those supplies there. Now, along with this comes the skills for the larger injuries, but make sure you have all the basic stuff covered. So for about $150 or so, you can get a pretty good kit put together. Like I said, you could buy, the reason I like the pre-made kits sometimes is because of the cases that they're in. You can replace some of those supplies in there, and it sort of gives you a guideline of what you might need in your first aid kit as you're learning more about this. And after I got all of those taken care of, I would have built a bug out bag in the very beginning. And you don't need to go crazy on a bug out bag. It doesn't need to be all the top of the line stuff. You can spend about $200, get a decent quality bag. It doesn't have to be the most expensive, and some decent supplies to go in it. And then over time, you can upgrade those and get the bug out bag of your dreams, I suppose. And this isn't necessarily just a bug out bag for bug out situations. It can be a go bag, an everyday carry bag, whatever you need it for. Something that you're going to take with you on a daily basis and use in case disaster or emergency strikes while you're not at home. And we don't get to choose when disaster strikes, so the odds that we are at work or at school or somewhere else are pretty good. Now, the reason I added a bug out bag to this list is because this is, not only is it helpful in disasters and emergencies, but it's also a teaching tool. It teaches you about the 6 areas of preparedness: the food, the water, the first aid, the shelter, the sanitation, and the security. It's a micro preparedness plan, basically. So you learn about all the different things that you might need in preparedness. And what you learn from just putting together a little bug out bag, you can extrapolate into a bigger preparedness plan around the house. In your bug out bag, you'll have food, you'll have first aid supplies, you'll have shelter supplies, all the same things that you would have in a large scale or larger version of your preparedness plan. And like I said, there are plenty of supplies that you could go lower cost. Mora makes a great fixed blade knife for about $20, so you don't need to buy a $150, $200 Essie knife. You've got the $20 Sawyer or Live Straw water filters that you could put in there. So you can put together a bag relatively cheaply, and then over time, maybe you do want a better fixed blade knife. Maybe you do want a higher quality bag. You change those out and then take that bag, and some of the lower cost supplies are still going to be good, so that's sort of a reserve or maybe a start for somebody else in the family or a friend. So I think putting together a bug out bag is just a good idea, and it's something that can be done over time as well, and something that you'll be able to take with you, that everyday carry, in case something happens while you're away from home. So as you've probably noticed, this list isn't exactly $1,000. It really depends on what you already have and how much you really want to spend on one of these other items that you may need. You may be able to get away with spending less than $1,000, or you may just want to, bump that up to $1,500 or $2,000. But it's a great starting point. And it's even a great way, if you've been doing this for a couple of years, of sort of resetting and almost starting over. And if you are resetting and trying to get more organized, the odds are you already have quite a bit of this stuff, so you're not going to have to spend near as much as somebody that is starting out from zero. But like I said, it's a great starting point as you start learning about preparedness and you start learning about all the intricacies of what you might need or what you might want. This video that I've got here goes through things like home security, building community, and navigating any sort of disaster or emergency. Like I said, those intricacies and those things we do to fine-tune our preparedness plan. While the supplies are a crucial part of being prepared, we do need some of these different supplies. There's just so much more that goes into preparedness than how much we've spent on it. There is so much education and learning about different things and how to react in different situations. So if you're interested in that, make sure and watch this video here. With that, I am done today. If you've got any advice for anyone else, make sure and leave that in the comments below. Take care and prepare, everyone. We will talk to you all later.